Okay, here's one more video, one more brief video on emotion regulation. You notice there's more of these than I have of any of the other modules. And there's a reason for that. There's just a lot of very thick, dense skills, important skills. Practice takes a lot of effort. Also, this module, compared to some of the others, seems less coherent in having a simple model around which it's built. In fact, though, as I'll come to in a few minutes, I really think you can imagine this whole module around that model of emotions that we covered before with the complicated diagram. I left off in the last video about mindfulness of current emotion, and I just want to say one thing more about that because there's only a couple more handouts. This is a really important skill, and you don't want to go past it too quickly. This is the skill of allowing yourself to have the emotion, to allow it to be in you, to travel in you, to rise and fall in you, to flow in you, to know what it is, to track it, to bring the energy and awareness of mindfulness to the presence of an intense and often painful emotion in you. You could use metaphorically something Thich Nhat Hanh teaches, that you're really holding your painful emotion the way you would hold a baby that's crying. And you want to be aware of that baby and what the various causes might be. But first you need to just calm the baby down. So you need to just sort of practice mindfulness of your emotion with the steps that are in that skill, the way it's written, and just hold it. And that it takes time to get an emotion down. It's not going to work instantaneously. This is not like a crisis survival strategy. This is something to be practiced again and again. It's the difference between tumbling over and over, being caught in the wave of an emotion and going under and being churned up by your emotion as if you're inside the emotion. It's bigger than you are, and it's taking control of you. And what you want to get to is, in that metaphor of being in the waves, where at least your head is above water. Your head is above water, but you're experiencing the churning of the emotion in your body, in your sensations. But your head is above water, and it can observe the rest and stay alive, so to speak. And then eventually get to where you can get above the wave and surf the wave, as I talked about last time. So I would suggest spending a little time on this and practicing this. In some ways, this is one of the ultimate skills to practice in DBT if you've got other things. I mean, this is really a form of exposure, to expose yourself to your emotions without having to either exaggerate them or suppress them or act upon them or judge them. It's just to be with them. Okay? The next handout, yeah, I already talked about it last time, the skills breakdown point. It's just, there's no special point that you can locate exactly, but it's when you know that your emotions are just too intense, too painful, they're too 9 out of 10 to be able to use most of these skills I've been talking about. And then when you recognize you're at your skills breakdown point, as Linehan calls it, you then want to shift over to the skills for managing extreme emotions, such as the TIP skills and distress tolerance skills, until you can get yourself back down to where you can move back into emotion regulation skills, such as the one I just talked about being mindful of your emotions. There's 2 more handouts. They aren't starred, but they're really valuable summary handouts, you might say. And there are worksheets associated with these. One of them is this, Troubleshooting Emotion Regulation Skills, handout 24. When what you're doing isn't working. This is sort of like a troubleshooting in any manual, the manual for your dishwasher or your whatever you've got at home where it's not working, and you go to the part about troubleshooting, and it gives you a checklist of things to check, and that's what this is. So if you're still having trouble with emotional regulation, you can check these various things, and I'll just quickly go through them and make any comments from my own point of view about these. Check your biological sensitivity. So it's possible that things aren't working very well because you're just biologically more vulnerable. Maybe it has to do with the sleep and the eating and lack of exercise, physical illness, substances that you're using. All of these things that we cover in the please skills, it could be making you more sensitive, more vulnerable, and then you would want to work on in this checklist. It then suggests things you can work on. Then there's checking your skills, which is, are you using the skills that would be called for? Are you using them, the way they should be? You may need to review that, or go back and look at the skills and see what they are and whether you're doing them correctly, and get coaching if you need to. Checking for reinforcers is the third one. What might be reinforcing your negative emotions that makes them hard to reduce, hard to transform, because they are working in some way, maybe, and there's several suggestions that him gives. Are they working to be effective communicators of your distress or something to other people? And if so, can you find more effective ways to communicate than using your emotions if they're being overused for that and they're being reinforced because they work? People respond to your emotions. You can control a room with your emotions. You can get heard. You can motivate yourself with your emotions. So you get intense emotions and then it gets you going on something. And maybe you could work on different kinds of reinforcers to motivate yourself. And so that you don't need to use the power of your intense negative emotions. And then validating my beliefs or my identity. I mean, if having really negative emotions is partly reinforced by the fact that those emotions are congruent with your point of view of yourself in the world. You have the emotions of a tyrant, you have the emotions of a victim, you have the emotions of somebody who's always in pain, and in a way the emotions are reinforced because they they validate some view of yourself. And finally, if the emotions just help you feel good, it feels good to feel bad, strange as that may sound. So this is a way of just checking for, is there something reinforcing your emotions? Number 4, check your mood. What this really refers to is, are you in the mood to do what you need to do to regulate your emotions? If you're not in the mood to do it, you're probably not going to use any of these things as effectively. So you want to double check your mood and ask yourself, am I really putting in the time and effort that it takes to deal with problematic emotions? It takes time and effort. It's not quick. It isn't fair in life that some people have more of these than others, but the fact is that it takes real effort, and so are you putting in the effort? And if not, if you think, well, maybe I'm not, then it makes some suggestions in the page here to do pros and cons for working hard on skills and for to generate more willingness to do it and acceptance that you might need to do it, and then practice the skill of jumping in with both feet and you really doing these things, participating effectively. Okay, number 5, check for emotional overload. It's possible it's hard to regulate your emotions because there's just too many. You're just too upset to be able to settle down and use the skills. And then one question is, are you at the skills breakdown point that you should just do something on an emergency basis to bring that down, like the tip skills or other distress tolerance skills? And so several suggestions are made here about what to do if you're too upset to use complicated skills. The question is, can you problem solve that right now? And if you can't, maybe you just need to be practicing mindfulness of your emotions and whatever distress tolerance skills to get things down. Number 6, the last one, is check for emotional myths. Myths about emotions that are getting in the way, like maybe it's very hard to regulate your emotions because you have one of the many myths that were covered on an earlier handout and worksheet. And so you might want to see, like she suggests in here, that maybe you have a deeply held myth or belief that emotions are stupid, or some emotions are stupid, or there's a right way to feel in every situation and you're always not having it. And so you want to go back and check that, check the facts about that, see what your myths are, see if you can challenge those myths, and see if you can practice thinking non-judgmentally. One final worksheet here, which is, again, not starred, not something you'll cover with the patients necessarily unless you had a long time on this module, or you're going through it a second time and you want to review it, or somebody asks for extra study. This is a very interesting review of all the skills, or the categories of skills for emotion regulation, lined up with the model of emotions. And you can find most of them, and it just provides a sort of sense of order, that there is vulnerability, there is reducing your vulnerability with the various skills for that. There is changing your emotional thoughts and interpretations, such as using checking the facts. There is addressing the fact that prompting events come, and if you want to problem solve and reduce emotional prompting events, that's in that box. And then in the big box in the middle, you want to reduce your emotional reactions and your high arousal. So when things come at you and you get intense emotional responses, here's your distress tolerance skills, as well as mindfulness of current emotions. And then changing your emotional reactions by acting opposite, or using opposite body language, opposite words, the whole thing. Just figuring out, as we did before, what the urge is with the emotion, going opposite the urge and going all the way opposite the urge to turn things around and generate a different emotion. And then naming emotions. It is sometimes helpful to have a label, a handle on your emotion, so that you just have more of a sense of it. It's something that's in you, that you experience, that you label, that you notice, and that you have skills to try to do something about it. So there you go. That's the emotion regulation module, and good luck. I'll be on to another module, unless you've already covered all of them yourself.